The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Book 1. A Peculiar Family History. Chapter 1. Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov. Alexei Fyodorovich Karamazov was the third son of Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov, a landowner in our district who became a celebrity and is remembered to this day because of the tragic and mysterious end he met exactly 13 years ago, which will be described in its proper place. For the moment, I will only say of this landlord, as they referred to him here, although he spent hardly any time on his land, that he belonged to a peculiar though widespread human type, the sort of man who is not only wretched and depraved, but also muddle-headed in a way that allows him to pull off all sorts of shady little financial deals and not much else. Fyodor Karamazov, for instance, started with next to nothing. He was just about the lowliest landowner among us, a man who would dash off to dine at other people's tables whenever he was given the chance, and who sponged off people as much as he could. Yet, at his death, they found that he had 100,000 rubles in hard cash. And with all that, throughout his life, he remained one of the most muddle-headed eccentrics in our entire district. Let me repeat, it was not stupidity, for most eccentrics are really quite intelligent and cunning, and their lack of common sense is of a special kind, a national variety. He had been married twice and had 3 sons, the eldest, Dmitri, by his first wife, and the other 2, Ivan and Alexei, by the second. Fyodor Karamazov's first wife came from a fairly wealthy family of landed gentry, the Musovs, also from our district. Why should a girl with a dowry, a beautiful girl moreover, one of those bright, clever young things who in this generation are no longer rare, and who even cropped up occasionally in the last, why should she marry such a worthless freak, as they called him? I will not really attempt to explain, but then I once knew a young lady of the old, romantic generation, who, after several years of secret love for a gentleman whom, please note, she could have peacefully married at any moment she chose, invented insurmountable obstacles for herself, and one stormy night jumped from a steep, rather cliff-like bank into a fairly deep, rapid river and drowned, all because she fancied herself an Ophelia out of Shakespeare. Indeed, if the bank on which she had her eye for a long time had been less picturesque, or had there simply been a flat bank, it is conceivable that the suicide would never have taken place at all. This is a true story, and it must be assumed that in the past 2 or 3 generations quite a few familiar incidents have occurred. In the same way, what Adelaida Musov did was undoubtedly an echo of outside influences, and also the act of exasperation of a captive mind. Perhaps she was trying to display feminine independence, to rebel against social conventions, against the despotism of her family and relatives, while her ready imagination convinced her, if only for a moment, that Fyodor Karamazov, despite his reputation as a sponger, was nevertheless one of the boldest and most caustic men of that period of transition toward better things, whereas in reality he was nothing but a nasty buffoon. The fact that the marriage plans included elopement added piquancy to it, making it more exciting for Adelaida. Fyodor, at that time, would of course have done nothing to improve his lowly position, and the opportunity to latch on to a good family and to pocket a dowry was extremely tempting to him. As for love, there does not seem to have been any, either on the bride's part, or, despite her beauty, on Karamazov's. This was perhaps a unique case in Fyodor Karamazov's life, for he was as sensual as a man can be, one who throughout his life was always prepared, at the slightest encouragement, to chase any skirt. But his wife just happened to be one woman who did not appeal to him sensually in the least. Right after the elopement, Adelaida realized that she felt nothing but scorn for her husband. It quickly became obvious what married life was to be. Despite the fact that her family accepted the situation quite soon and gave the runaway bride her dowry, relations between husband and wife became an everlasting succession of quarrels. It was rumored that, in these quarrels, the young wife displayed incomparably more dignity and generosity than her husband, who, it was found out later, soon wheedled out of her every kopeck of the 25,000 rubles she had received. So that, so far as she was concerned, those thousands were sunk in deep waters never to be salvaged again. As to the little country estate and the quite decent townhouse, there was also part of her dowry. He kept trying desperately to have them transferred to his name by some suitable deed. He probably would have succeeded because of the loathing and disgust his constant pleading and begging inspired in his wife, because she would do anything to have peace, sick and tired as she was of him. But luckily Adelaida's family intervened in time to put a stop to his greed. People knew that husband and wife often came to actual blows, and rumor had it that it was she who beat him, rather than he her. Indeed, Adelaida was hot-tempered, bold, dark, and impatient lady endowed with remarkable physical strength. Finally, she eloped with a half-starved tutor, a former divinity student, leaving her husband with their 3-year-old boy, Mitya. Fyodor Karamazov immediately installed a regular harem in the house and indulged in the most scandalous drunken debauchery. But between one orgy and the next, he would drive all over the province, complaining tearfully to all that sundry of Adelaida's desertion, and revealing on these occasions certain unsavory intimate details of their conjugal life that any other husband would have been ashamed to mention. He even seemed to enjoy, indeed to feel flattered by, his ridiculous role as a cuckolded husband, for he insisted on describing his own disgrace in every minute detail, even embellishing on it. "Why, Fyodor Pavlovich," people remarked, "you act as if an honor had been bestowed upon you. You seemed pleased despite your sorrow." Many even added that he was delighted to have the role of clown thrust upon him, that he only pretended to be unaware of his ridiculous position in order to make it even funnier. But who can really tell? Possibly he was quite ingenuous about it all. He finally succeeded in getting on the track of his runaway wife. It led to Petersburg, where the poor thing had moved with her divinity student, and where she had abandoned herself to a life of complete emancipation. Fyodor Karamazov immediately busied himself with preparations for the journey to Petersburg, and perhaps he would have gone, although he certainly had no idea what he would do there. But once he had decided to go, he felt that he had a special reason for plunging into a bout of unrestrained drunkenness, to fortify himself for the journey, and just at that time his in-laws received word that Adelaida had died in Petersburg. She died suddenly, in a garret, of typhus according to some, of starvation according to others. Karamazov was drunk when he learned of his wife's death, and some say he exclaimed joyously, raising his hand to heaven, "Lord, now let your servant depart in peace." But according to others, he wept sobbing like a little boy, so that people felt sorry for him despite the disgust he aroused in them. It is quite possible that they were all right, that he rejoiced in his regained freedom and wept for the woman from whom he had been freed, both at once. In most cases, people, even the most vicious, are much more naive and simple-minded than we assume them to be, and this is true of ourselves too.